Thank Hashem that we're able to learn. It's just about learning to be some English. Should be panacea. Starting Memhei on the bottom, 3 lines from the bottom, Memhei Manalef. Sholchalei b'nei Bei Michsi l'Rabba. The people of Bei Michsi, they sent a question to Rabba. Yeah. Yesterday we learned that there's a machlekes if a non-Jew lives with a Jewish woman and they have a child, if the child is considered a mamzer. The halakha was that it's not considered a mamzer. Child is fine. But now we're asking, what about if a half slave? How does someone become a half slave? He was owned by partners, and one of the partners freed him. So the other partner didn't. So he's half slave and half free. Half slave means that he's half not Jewish. Half free means he's half Jewish. So and then he lives with a Jewish girl, and they have a child. What's the din with that child? Amar lei. So Rabba responds, "Has to have it kuli aminan kosher chatzav midbai." If he would be entirely a slave, entirely not Jewish, then we said that the child is kosher. Is it going to get worse because he's half Jewish? Does that make it worse? Even if he wasn't Jewish? You with me? Okay. Amar Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef says, Mara d'shmaita manu. What's the source that you have that says that someone that's not Jewish that lives with a Jewish girl, the child is going to be kosher? What's your source? That's Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda is Rav Yehuda Bar Yecheskel. He's the Amira, the student of Rav, student of Shmuel. But Rav Yehuda also says, someone that's a half slave and half free, that he lives with a Jewish girl, that child has no solution. Has no solution means he's a mamzer. We have a contradictory psak here. First, you tell me that if he's entirely not Jewish, the child is kosher. And that was clearly Rav Yehuda's psak. What do we have then? Rav Yehuda actually told him. Yeah. And Rav Yehuda said you can go get married. Maybe people won't want to marry you, but so don't tell them your background. Yeah. So we have a contradiction in the psak of Rabbi Yehuda. Rameshi, with us? Okay. We're traveling already. Unbelievable. So, yeah, we're called Mahalchim, right? Mahalchim Beinaimdim. So here, when it seems like when it's half, it's worse. So Kiyat Mad Rav Yehuda and the Kaddish Bas Yisrael. This statement of Rav Yehuda, this is a very interesting answer. He was married. He's married to her. He married her. Not that he lived with her. He married her. Okay, now who got married here? Well, he's only half slave, half free. So who would be able to have a marriage? The half free part. So now comes along the half slave part and commits adultery with the half marriage of the other side. It's adultery. She's a married woman. And the slave is not the husband. The free man is the husband. Unbelievable. Okay. So the problem is this is not so accurate. Because Nardai said a name of Rabbi Yaakov, according to the one that says that a non-Jew that lives with the Jew, the child is puzzle. That does not matter if the woman was married or if the woman is penuya. Paisel feel a bit penuya even if she's single. The one that says that the child from such a union is kosher, machsha filu beishasish. That child is kosher even if the girl was married. The Jewish girl was married, and the non-Jew commits adultery. The child is not a mamzer. Mamzer is only going to be from a Jewish father, not from a non-Jew. Oh. Well, right now we're discussing that without confusing it, that an adulterous union would create a mamzer, but that has to be it has to be a Jew that's the adulterer, not a non-Jew. That's what we're learning. If that's the case, that it has to be a Jew, then what are you telling me that when he's a half slave and half free, that he's married, the half free part is married, and the half slave part comes in and commits adultery, and that's why the child is ain't like takana. Even if the father, the adulterer is not Jewish, the child is not a mamzer. You didn't answer the question. Okay. Where do we know this from? Very interesting halacha. We learn it from Eishes Av. Eishes Av means the person's father's wife. Now, how do we learn from Eishes Av? What it says is that a person should not marry the wife of his father. Now, it doesn't have to be his mother. It means his father married someone else and maybe divorced her. He's not allowed to marry her. And the next verse says, La Yavai Mamzer. A mamzer is not allowed to come into the congregation. Now, we learn that someone that does marry his father's wife would create the mamzer because of that juxtaposition. So, Manda Puzzle, the one that says that that the child is invalid, is mamzer. Just like if someone tries to marry his father's wife, it's still not a marriage that there's no it's not even a kedushin. It's nothing. It's nothing. There's no marriage there. The relative is too close. So any relationship, any union that there's no marriage, that's what's going to create the mamzer. Like incest. Man de machsher, the one that says that the child from such a union is kosher, the father's wife. The son can't marry her, but anyone else is allowed to. So it has to be the type of person that kedushin would work. Just in this instance, it doesn't work. This is excluding a non-Jew, where kedushin doesn't work for anyone. No, this non-Jew can't marry any Jewish person. No kedushin. If a non-Jew gives a wedding ring to a Jewish girl, they're not married. They don't need a get. There's no marriage there. What does she do with that? She says. Right. So they don't need a divorce. They don't need a divorce. Right. Not halachically. Yeah. Yeah, I took this guy. This guy walked into the yeshiva when I was a buck. So we put tefillin on him, and then he was speaking. We bought him a siddur, and then he said, I should get a tallis. I see the men wearing tallis. I said, yeah, were you married? He said, yeah. So it's okay. So we went to the Judaica store in Los Angeles. We were going to buy him a tallis. So as we're picking out a tallis, I said, what's your wife? He is divorced. I said, yeah. I said, what's your wife? Jewish. So he said, oh, no, she wasn't Jewish. I said, oh, you don't need a tallis. He said, oh, I wish the courts would have said that. Okay. So, the Gemara switches everything around exactly the opposite. It's unbelievable. What happened now is that this fellow that's half slave and half free, what did he do? We said before that he married a girl, and then because he lived with her, it's like adultery from the slave side. And then we said, but the slave committing adultery does not create a mamzer because the slave isn't Jewish and a mamzer doesn't come from a non-Jew. Mamzer has to be from a Jew. Now the Gemara switches it. The Gemara says, actually, you know what's the story over here is that he lived with a Jewish girl that's married. Now, where's the problem? Not the problem of the slave, the problem is the free part. That's adultery. And that's what created the mamzer. So that's what when Rabbi Yehuda said that Misha Chetzev Eved B'Chetzev Ben Chayrin, that lives with the Jewish girl, the child has no solution. That's talking about because the girl was married, and it's the Jewish part that creates the problem, not the not Jewish part. Turns out that a non-Jew that lives with the Jewish girl, the child is perfect. There's no problem. Amar Ravina. Ravina says, Amali Rav Gaza. Rav Gaza told me. Interesting. It's not such a common name. Ikla Rav Yesi Baravin Lasrin, that Rav Yesi Baravin came to our town, and there was a story with a slave that lived with a Jewish girl, not married. And Rav Yesi Baravin said that the child that came from that union is not a mamzer. As we've been learning, it was machlekes, but we've accepted the psak that the child is okay. Beishasish, the slave lived with a married woman. Upasal, a Jewish woman, married to a Jewish man, a non-Jewish slave. And the child was considered a mamzer. Amar Rav Sheshes, Lididi Amali Rav Gaza. Rav Sheshes says, actually, Rav Gaza told it to me a little bit different. He said, "Lei Rabbi Yesi bar Rav Navel, Rabbi Yesi bar Zavida Hava." It wasn't Rabbi Yesi bar Rav, it was Rabbi Yesi bar Zavida. These were the two sages in Eretz Yisrael. If you remember the Gemara Shabbos, each one gave a different reason why, for Bishamai's view, Bishil's view, why you light the candles. Rabbi Yesi bar Rav and Rabbi Yesi bar Zavida. That was these sages. So apparently they over there also, I think it was confused which one said what. I don't remember. But over here also, it's being confused which sage. Both of them are Rabbi Yesi. One is Rabbi Yesi bar Av and one's Rabbi Yesi bar Zavida. And Rav Sheshes is saying really what happened was it was Rabbi Yesi bar Zavida. And he said that both the children are kosher, whether the girl was married or whether the girl was not married. The children are kosher from the non-Jewish slave. Amali Ravacha Brei the Rava the Ravina. Ravacha Brei the Rava says to Ravina, Ikla Ameimar Liasrin. Ameimar came to our town. And he told us, he passed him that whether the slave lived with a non-married girl, or whether it was a married girl, the child from that union is going to be kosher. The hilchasa in the halacha is usually when it says the hilchasa, it's usually the goinim that are passing for us. The halacha is that a non-Jew or a slave that lives with a Jewish girl, the child is kosher, whether the girl was married or whether the girl was single. Rabba Achshrei Rav Mari Barachel. You see, Mari Barachel is called by his mother's name, Rachel. Who was his father? His father was a fellow by the name of Isser. And Isser Giura, Isser the convert. Turned out that Isser had lived with Rachel and had this child, Mari. And later on he converted. According to some commentaries, Rachel is actually the daughter of Shmuel. And when Shmuel's daughters were taken captive, they were freed. We say who freed them? I don't remember, but they testified about each other. Something they were taken captive in somehow they ended up in Eretz Yisrael. So the captor would, according to some, would be Isser. He ended up marrying her and converting. So the child's name was Mari. So Rava said that Mari is a kosher child. His father's not Jewish, his mother's Jewish. And not only that, but he even appointed him as an important person how do they translate like a governor or something, like a president? What was he appointed as? A Pursi, some important position in Babylonia. The Gemara says, 1 second. An official. Kol Masimais Shat Mesim al you el Mikarav Achicha. Says Mikarav Achecha Tasim Malach Melech. From amongst your brothers, you should appoint an official. You should appoint a king. This fellow, Murray, is not really from amongst your brothers because his father is a non-Jew. So, how was Rava allowed to appoint him as an official? The fact that his mother was Jewish means that he's your brother. Big taste for Sevilla. Says by Agrippa Samelach, Gemara Saita discusses that they told him, he started to cry when he was reading this verse. They told him, don't cry, you're our brother. And at that point, the Jewish people committed a sin. They should not have flattered him like that because it was really a problem for him to be appointed. Now, who was Agrippa? So he was a child from Herod and the Jewish girl. What's the problem? According to our Gemara, if the mother's Jewish, that's fine. I know Herod was a Idumean, was a slave, but the mother's Jewish. Yeah, Tosfos discusses this. Interesting. Okay.
Where are we holding now?
I'm holding on 45D.
45D.
Bottom. You have the Koran edition?
I have the Koran.
So yeah. It's on page 309. On the top of the page. Avdei. We're up to the word Avdei.
Thank you.
Avdei de Reb Chia Barami Atbala Lahu Avedis Kacham L'Shem Intasa. So we have a slave of Reb Chia Barami. And he's keeping the Torah because he's a non-Jewish slave that has to keep the mitzvahs just like a Jew, like the mitzvahs that a woman keeps. Doesn't have to wear tefillin, but he keeps other mitzvahs. So he wants to get married, not really getting married, but he wants to designate one of some other slave to be his wife, be his partner. Yeah, they don't have like a marriage because they're slaves, but he wants to have a designated partner. So what he does is, she's not Jewish, but what about Nida? So she doesn't have the laws of Nida because she's not Jewish. What about for him? He's supposed to keep the laws, and a non-Jewish girl has the rabbinic laws of Nashgaz. Nida, the Gemara in Avodah Zarah has all the impurities that are applied to the non-Jews rabbinically. So what he does is he tells her she should go to the mikveh to purify herself. When she went to the mikveh, Rav Yosef said about this, I could say that this girl is now Jewish. She's Jewish, and her daughter's Jewish. Why? Why is she Jewish? She went to the mikveh. Now, she didn't go to the mikveh to convert. She went to the mikveh for Nida. But we have a statement from Rav Asi, which we're going to see in a moment, that Rav Asi says that the mikveh of Nida would work for a conversion. It's unbelievable what this does to conversions. All the questions on conversions would be automatically resolved with this Gemara. Well, I don't know who did the conversion. So what? She went to the mikveh, and she went to the mikveh for Nida. Right? Would resolve everything. The brata. What about her daughter? How are we going to resolve that? He says, well, once you resolve the mother, that the mother's Jewish, you resolve the child, because even if the father's not Jewish, but the child is kosher. Okay, we'll come up with this in a minute. With this Rabasi. It says, Hahu Davikari Le Bar Armaisa. There was this fellow, they were calling him the son of an Aramean woman. Yeah, that must have been an insult. Took someone's seat in shul. They yelled at him, you, whatever. Amar Rabasi, Milay Tabla Lenidusa, you can't call her the son of an Aramean woman. The mother, what they were doing was they were complaining, or they were claiming that the mother had not converted properly. So Ravasi says, but she went to the mikveh for a nida, so that means that the conversion is valid. Because even if not, the nida tefillah itself is good. Yeah, Taisus goes through it. What's going on? But you need a bezdin. There's no bezdin there at the mikveh when a woman goes to the mikveh for a nida. So, and Taisus says the bezdin is for kabbalas mitzvahs. Bezdin isn't for the mikveh. Some say that because everyone knows that she goes to the mikveh, it's as if there's a bezdin there. It's like an anan sadi. Anan sadi is like, we're all witnesses to this, because a woman goes to the mikveh, she went to the mikveh. We know the bezdin doesn't have to actually be there, mamish. That's not how it's done today, but that's what Taisus is suggesting. However, a woman goes to the mikveh at night. The ger has to go to the mikveh by day. What are we going to say about that? We say that what needs to be done by day is the kabbalas mitzvahs. Once you say that, where's the judgment? Where's the mishpat of the convert? That's only on accepting the mitzvahs. And you say that the mikveh is not necessarily what requires the court. So then, once you answer that, then you resolve all the questions. Yeah, based on this Tosfos, it would be very difficult to invalidate the conversion. Every conversion is, unless they never used the mikveh, But if they used the mikveh and they were living a Jewish life, then you would say, "But who did that conversion 50 years ago?" So what's the shaila? You have a Tosfos here, everything is resolved. Today, for some reason, it's much more complex, and the Tosfos of it gets pushed to the side. I think that's because they wanted to make it done properly. They didn't want to rely on this leniency. But this would really resolve a lot of. I was at a rabbinical conference regarding conversion. The idea was Moshe Soloveitchik, from Chicago. He was saying, Taisus was shouting. This Taisus was yelling at the other rabbis that were being strict. He says, Taisus, Milay Tablani, that's what he's telling me. Taisus.
So it seems to suggest here that if like a Goya goes to the mikvah, because she's nida from her monthly cycle,
right,
then that's a kol chomer that is converted.
According to this, as long as she accepted the Torah, which is that it appears that that's what she's doing because she's going to the mikvah. She would have to accept the Torah in front of 3 rabbis, but the mikvah would work as a mikvah for the conversion, according to this Tosfos. Yeah.
Oh, wow, thank you.
Yeah. The practical halacha, don't take from the Daf Yomi. Ask the rabbi. There was a fellow, they were calling him that his father is a non-Jew. Maybe his father didn't convert or something. What are you saying? He went to the mikveh when he was a keri, when he was tamei, went to the mikveh. So that's good enough. You know, the Evanescence of Shabbat, Arami, Ayadavi. What does it mean, Arami, Ayadavi? Arami, the way we translate it as Arami, tried to destroy our father. But Evanescence learns, Arami, Ovid, Avi. My father was a lost Aramean. Yeah, Abraham, because it was from Abraham, it's called an Aramean. Amar Rav Chama Bar Guria, Amar Rav, Halakiach Eved Min Ovid Kechav Mekadam Etavel Hashem Ben Chayrin Kanatz Ben Chayrin. Very interesting Gemara. Someone purchases a slave from a non-Jew. Now, what happens is he wants to. Usually, the slave goes to the mikveh for the sake of being a slave. Puts him in as a slave. It's like a quasi conversion. It's not a real conversion. He puts him in be a slave. However, the slave jumped in and he like shouts, "I'm doing this to be a free man," and he Kanatz ben Chayrin. He's a free man.
That's the original Emancipation Proclamation.
Yeah. Right. So he would have to pay for what his value was, and you'd have to. Where would he get the money from? He'd have to work. What was that called when the slaves came over and they paid themselves? What was that called? They got the ride over here for free. As they would work as a slave. There's no free ride. Okay. Indenture. Right. So Kanat Melcha, my timer. What's the reason for this? The non-Jew himself didn't own the body. So Gufa like Kanile, he didn't own the body. The first owner only owned the labor, didn't own the person. So therefore, the Maknile Yisrael, he was only giving the labor to but there was no ownership. Even the Kadam B'Taval Hashem Ben Chayrin Afkal Shibude, when he jumped in the mikveh and he shouts that it's becoming free, so the shibud of the ownership of the labor just disappears because he owned himself. How does this work? Give the Rabbah, like Rabbah says, Namar Rabbah, Hekdesh Chametz B'Shichrer, Hekdesh Chametz B'Shichrer, Mafkimi De Shibud. That means if a person has an item that's an apoitiki is an acronym for apoit tehei. That means when you want to collect, you collect from this object. This will be, it's like a lien on an item, like a mashkin, but it's a lien on this item. So there's a lien on an item, and the person goes along and says, "Tektish." In other words, the borrower says that the item that I made the lien is now hektish. So the lien just pops off. It's going to become hektish. The guy loses his, the mortgage. And the same is with chametz. Comes the 6th hour, Erev Pesach. The lien goes off it because it becomes asur. What else would happen? In Shifra, this is a slave. That if a person was made as the slave was made as a apoitiki, that you'll collect from this slave. Like if I don't pay you back, and then he goes ahead and frees the slave. So the person that lent him the money just loses his whole source of where to collect from.
Like early open.
Right. Masav Rav Chizda. Rav Chizda has a question. Rav Chizda is going to ask is that it seems that a Jew is able to get the ownership of the body of the slave, to actually own him when it's sold him from a non-Jew. Maisa b'bluria hagiyaris. Yeah, Bluria, probably the name Valerie. The giyaris shekadmu avdei v'tablu lefanah. Her slaves, I guess she was converting but her slaves that were not converting, but were going to the mikveh before her, to be the Jewish slaves, not to be the Jewish slaves, to be slaves of a Jewish woman. The story came in front of the sages. They're free. But from the fact that it says lefaneha, no, lefaneha has two translations. It either means in front of her or it means before her. So if they went before she converted in, but if she converts first and then the slaves jump in, it's too late. She owns their body. A Jewish person can own the body of the slave, but a non-Jew cannot own the body of the slave. So we're seeing that a Jew can acquire the body of the slave, and if that's the case, then how does the slave jump in and say that he's free? Amarava, Rava says like this: Lefaneha, if it's before she converts, then bein bistam bein mefurish, then it goes to the mikveh, and to be free, we assume that it's to be free, whether he says so explicitly or he doesn't say so. But if it's after she converts, then then he would have to make that announcement. Okay, I don't understand how this works. What does it really have to do with? Does she own him or not? If she owns him, the slave, then how does it help when he says Mefurish? How does it help him to make a proclamation that this is what he's doing? I'm not sure how that works. Okay. The Amar of Avia. This is only when we have this discussion about the slave becoming free. That's only if a Jewish person purchases the slave from a non-Jewish person. But if the non-Jewish person himself sells himself as a slave to the Jew, Kani, then the person acquires the whole body, and the slave cannot jump in the mikveh and make a proclamation that he's free. And also from the people that dwell amongst you, from them you should buy slaves. You acquire from them, but they should not acquire from you. And they can't acquire one from the other. What does it mean that they can't acquire from you, Lamai? What is this referring to? If it's referring to the work of his hands, a non-Jewish person can't be a slave to a non-Jew. That the non-Jew owns the work of his hands, its labor. But we have clear psukim about this. Or an offshoot to the family of a stranger. That if your brother is poor and the stranger is wealthy, and your brother has to sell himself to the non-Jew, so we see that there is a concept of a Jewish slave to a non-Jewish master. Must mean that that the non-Jewish master doesn't own the body of the Jew; he just owns the labor. So when it says that the non-Jew can't buy the Jew, that means he doesn't buy the body. But it says the Jew can buy the non-Jew, that means he does buy the body, because that's all we're talking about, because labor works both ways. So when it says that this only works one way, it must be acquiring the actual body of the non-Jew. Okay. This proves our point that if a non-Jew sells himself to a Jew, that the Jew owns the body of the non-Jew. The non-Jew can't jump in the mikveh and say, I'm free. Because there's no one there, there's no ownership that's making him free. There's no one buying him out. If the non-Jew owns himself and it's just labor, then you would say that, well, he jumped in and he's made himself free. Parach Rabacha. Rabacha has a question. He says, Ema bekaspa betfila. How do you know that it's automatic that that the Jewish person owns the body of the slave, maybe there's two steps to it. Maybe first he gets the money, and then he has to go to the mikveh. But in the interim, in between the money and the mikveh, it's possible that he could jump into the mikveh on his own and claim himself free. Maybe he only owns him once he went to the mikveh as a slave. But before that mikveh, maybe he's able to get himself free. So Gemara says kasha. That's a good question. Amar Shmuel says when you put a slave in the mikveh, you have to hold him in the water. But otherwise, he can come out and say, I went under, I had in mind to be free. So we have to show him is that, no, we put you in the water. It doesn't mean, I'm not saying hold him under the water. I'm saying, no, hold him in the water, like you put him in the water and take him out. That's where he doesn't claim that I did this on my own and now I'm a free man. Ki hai de Minyamin Abdi de Ravashi. There's a slave of Ravashi. His name was Minyamin, like Benjamin, but this was Minyamin. And
Another variation. Like
manumission. Boilat Bule. He wanted to put him into the mikveh. So Masrin Ale Ravina Ravacha. He gave him over to Ravina Ravacha. Ravacha Brei Rava. He says, Amlu Chazu. Make sure. Be careful. I'm going to claim from you if he goes in the water and he shouts that he's a free man. I'm going to claim from you that it's you caused this loss. So what did they do? Ramalei Arvisa B'Tzavari. They put a rope, a leash over his neck. What is it? Bridle. Arpulei, they loosened it. It's Tzamtzmalei, and then they tightened it. Arpulei, why did they loosen it? Because he had to go to the mikveh. It's too tight. The water won't get in between. It's going to be an interruption, interposition. And they tighten it. They didn't want him to come out saying that I went to the mikveh with intention to be a free person. As he's lifting his head out of the water, they put a bucket of clay on his head. They said, go bring this to your master. Like before he could make any claim, they wanted to make sure that it was clear that he's a slave. Yeah. It's like the critical moment. As he comes out of the water, that's the one that he couldn't make any claim that, okay. Amalei Rav Papa Rava. Rav Papa is a student of Rava. And he says to Rava, he says, Chazimar Hani Debei Papa Baraba. You notice that those people of Papa Baraba, what happened was there were people that were supposed to pay a head tax. People that didn't pay the tax, so become slaves of the king. So Papa Baraba would buy these slaves. He would pay the tax for them, and then they would become his slaves. He's asking, Kinafki, when they go out, do they need a document that says that they're now free? Were they non-Jewish people? It seems like they're non-Jewish people. Yeah. He's asking, what type of ownership does Papa Baraba, which is not Rav Papa. Papa Baraba is a very wealthy man that was able to pay these taxes. Rav Papa is asking Rava, does Papa Baraba own their bodies? Or does he own them entirely? That when they leave, they need a document. It's called a deed of manumission. That means that they're free. Amalei makes a comment, and I'm not sure what this comment is coming in. He said, if I would be dead, I wouldn't be able to answer you this question. Now, what's the explanation for that? Why is he saying this over here? I mean, that's every question has that same response. He said, but what he's saying is that I happen to be, I know the answer. You're lucky you asked me. Does he say why is he saying this?
Oh, it says in according to Tosfos that if the law of the land already allows it, that they're ordering, then what, if Dina Melchizedek, why do they need anything additional? They already would be emancipated on their release.
Uh-huh. No, I'm asking not about the law. I'm asking about the expression that he uses. Were I dead, I would not have been able to answer that. Just that expression. In this note, he says that this was a halacha that was whispered to him, and he was one of the only people that knew it. So that's why he said, "Oh, it's good that you asked me." So Hachi Amar Rav Sheshas. Rav Sheshas said the following: Mahar Kaihu. That means their document of slavery, the honey of these people, B'tafsa de Malka Mana, is in the treasury of the king. Malka Amar, the king says, Mandala Yav Karga, Mishtabed Lamanda Yav Karga. The one that doesn't pay the tax is enslaved to the person that paid the tax for them. So what's happening is really everyone is a slave of the king. And the king just doesn't work them as slaves. But that's the nature of that agreement. The king has the whole land, and everyone that's there is a slave. If they don't pay the tax, then the king takes advantage of that. He takes them as a slave. So they're already slaves. So then when he gives them over to the person that paid the tax, then they will need a document. Reb Chia bar Abba, the student of Rabbi Yochanan, important student of Rabbi Yochanan, Ikla legavla. He went to this place called Gavla. Chaza b'nais. Yeah, I have on the side that it's the land of Edom that was conquered by the Hashmonaim. Anyway, Chaza b'nais Yisrael d'ma'abra megerim. He saw that there were Jewish girls that were made pregnant from converts, Shamalu v'lei tavlu, that had not finished their conversion. They had the bris, but they didn't go to the mikveh yet. These boys that were in the middle of their conversion process were already living with Jewish girls. And that's a problem. Because of Chamra de Yisrael, the Mazki Evit Kecham B'Shas Yisrael, they saw Jewish wine that non-Jews were pouring, waiters, and the Jewish people were drinking it. Because of Thomas in the Shalkal Evit Kecham B'Achli Yisrael. And he saw that there were these tormasin, is a type of bean, blue pines, that the non-Jews cooked, and the Jewish people were eating them. It's bishalakam, and Rav Chia bar Abba doesn't tell him anything. Also, Lakami de Rabbi Yochanan comes to Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan is his teacher. First of all, make an announcement that their children are mamzerim. Why? Because if you remember, Rabbi Yochanan before this we learned yesterday. Rabbi Yochanan held that Ovid Kechavim, a non-Jew that lives with a Jewish girl, the children are mamzerim, which is not the way Rabbi Yehuda and Rav and Shmuel, not the way everyone else paskin, but that's Rabbi Yochanan's view. And make an announcement that their wine is yayin nesach, a non-Jewish person is pouring it. Now, Tormasin, you should, because they're not Torah scholars there, you have to make just a rule that it's considered bishalakim, even though it's really not, but you don't want them to get confused. So you tell them that it's bishalakim. Okay, now let we go through to explain these three comments. When we said that the children are mamzer Rabbi Yochanan, this Rabbi Yochanan following this reason that Rabbi Chia bar Abba says name of Rabbi Yochanan loylamein ger ad sheyimal v'yitbal. He's not a ger until he does the tefillah. You have to do the mila and the tefillah, circumcision and the mikvah. Even the leitavel, he didn't go to the mikvah yet. I would kechavim. Then he's still not Jewish. Rabba bar Bachanam Rabbi Yechon I would kecham ve'eved abal bas Yisrael avlad mamzer. Rabba bar Bachanam says the name of Rabbi Yechonon, a non-Jewish man that lives with a Jewish girl. The child is a mamzer. So we're dealing with in between the circumcision and the mikvah. The status of that person is that he's still not Jewish, and then the status of a child from a union between that man and a Jew, according to Rabbi Yechonon, is a mamzer, not according to the way, not the way we learned. Yeah, but Rabbi Yechonon holds on. It's all discussion years ago in Yerushalayim about the convert that had already had a circumcision, but he didn't go to the mikveh, and Shilat, he's allowed, if he has to be Machal Shabbos, someone that's not Jewish, if he has to be Machal Shabbos. The question was, what's his status when he after the circumcision? He's not a non-Jew, but he's not Jewish yet. He's like taken off the non-Jewishness, but hasn't gone to the mikveh, but on the Jewish. What's his status then regarding Shabbos? There's a big machlokes amongst the Rabbanim. There's another discussion about the wine.
How did they decide?
I don't know. They argued about it. And then the wine is a big discussion because you wouldn't have a problem of Yayin Nesef because he's already not a non-Jew, right? That's the place we discuss that.
Well,
someone that's in between.
One, we have that to mean that if someone has the intent to do something right, if they're late, if they did right, but they're not, the opposite is not true with doing something wrong. So
Right.
his intent was to convert. It just wasn't finished yet. So why not
Right.
just say, oh, okay, but you know what? We'll consider that as if he did it already, even though it wasn't done yet.
Right. It's a deep question. When basically the question is, when do we say all of the as ifs, as if they've already, as if they're done already? And when do we say keilu? Yeah. Okay. Why is the wine yayin nesach? They didn't actually pour the wine. They didn't touch the wine. Even the non-Jews, they poured the bottle. They didn't touch the actual wine. So, well, that's mishum lech lech amrin nazira schar schar lekamar lesikra. We tell the nazir, go around the vineyard. Don't get close. In other words, we have to make a fence around this so that they don't mess up. What? People that are knowledgeable of Torah are allowed to eat bishul akum. We have a statement from Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak in the name of Rav. Anything that's eaten raw does not have an issue of bishul akum. There's two rules of bishul akum. One is that it can't be eaten raw. So for example, vegetables, carrots, and tomatoes, whatever. It's no problem of bishul akum. We eat them raw. The guy cooks carrots for you or something. So there's no problem with that. It could be eaten raw. You're allowed to eat it. What would be a problem? Well, something that's meat, something that can't be eaten raw. Now there's a whole question about fish, because fish was never eaten raw, but today it is eaten raw. So is there an issue of bishul akum? So 1 second, these lupines, these tourmasin are not eaten raw. So what are you telling me that we're making a decree because the people are not knowledgeable of Torah, we have to make it forbidden, even though it's not really forbidden? It is really forbidden. It's not eaten raw. This is a huge problem. The Gemara says, there was another statement there. The second rule of bishul akum. Shmuel Bar Yitzchak says, name of Rab, Kol Shein Oil Al Shulchan Malachim Lachol Be'esapas. Ein Ba Mishum Bishul Kechavim. It has to be the main course. If it's not fit to be put on the king's table as a main course, Lachol Be'esapas, so then there's no Bishul Akum. And it has to be something that would be served on the table. Now everything is served on the table, but even potato chips are served on the table, but not as a main course, right? Yeah, I remember one morning, I must have said this, woke up in the paper in Providence. As a kid, my grandmother was talking about how Brown University did a study on what food people liked most. So at their annual dinner, they served that food. It turned out it was Captain Crunch cereal. So these academics, that's what they served at the dinner. So that would mean that these cereals are Eilal Shulchan Malach for them. Yeah, someone said they went to the Chazon Ish to ask if sardines are Eilal Shulchan Malach. Chazon Ish took out said by appointment to the Queen. You know, they had that little thing. See, it's Eilal Shulchan Malach by appointment. But they put that on everything. So. Okay, the time of the B'nai Torah. So over here, these lupines are not Eilal Shulchan Malachim as the main course, and so therefore it's only forbidden because they don't know the distinction, and that's why they made it forbidden. But otherwise, if people that understand that this is different, that would be permissible.
Was that King Sati?
Taner Rabbanan, this is the sugi of Geras. We entered into this discussion over here. Taner Rabbanan. It's in a few places. Well, actually, it's not. This is the main place. There's other little halachas that come up from other places, creases. Taner Rabbanan, Gershom Malva Leitava. Of a brisa, a convert. It's called the convert even before he converts. A convert that had a bris, but he didn't go to the mikveh yet. Rabbi Eliezer Aimer Hareza Ger. Rabbi Eliezer says up, did the main thing, the circumcision, he's a ger. That's what our fathers did in Egypt. Before they ate the carbon pesach, they had to have a bris. So they had the bris, and then they ate the carbon pesach. They didn't have a mikveh. So, and that was considered a conversion. Taval v'loy mal. Let's say he went to the mikveh, but he didn't have a circumcision. This is like the easy part, right? For the convert. So Rabbi Shua says, how did the women convert? They didn't have a circumcision. It's because they went to the mikveh. See, the mikveh is the main thing. So that's Rabbi Shua's logic. He says that the mikveh is the main thing. The Chacham say taval v'lei mal v'lei taval einay ger. What's that, man? What that goes to? No, that's not. Ein ger actually yimal v'yitbal. You have to do both. Until you have both, it's nothing. Gemara asked Rabbi Shua, why doesn't Rabbi Shua learn that it's considered a good conversion? Because that's what our fathers did in Egypt. Just the Mila. Rabbi Lezer and why doesn't Rabbi Lezer learn from the mothers? The mothers didn't have a circumcision, they just went to the mikveh. Maybe you're going to tell me, it's answering Rabbi Eliezer. Maybe Rabbi Eliezer would say, the fact that the mothers didn't have a circumcision is not a proof that men don't need a circumcision. Women don't have a circumcision because it's impossible. But for the men where it is possible, then you have to. This is the concept of ain done in efsher, misha'i efsher. You can't judge, you can't learn from something that's impossible over to something that's possible. It says, but that's not the case. Because Rabbi Eliezer says that you do. You see, they would go to Yerushalayim for the holiday. When they would get there, they had Meiser Sheni money. The money that's only allowed to be spent in Yerushalayim on food. So, but the only thing is, you're only allowed to spend it on things, on items that are not an obligation. You can't spend it on obligations. You can't pay your debts with it. Anything that's an obligation, you can't use, but you can buy any food. So, what about the carbon pesach? Are you allowed to use the carbon pesach? You're allowed to buy it with your meiser money. Meiser sheni sounds like a good deal. You have the meiser money anyway. It says, Rabbi Eliezer says, how do you know that it can only be brought from Chulin? Nemar Pesach Mitzrayim and Nemar Pesach Deiros. Ma Pesach Mitzrayim in ba Elam and Achul, Pesach Hamal Deiros in ba Elam Achul. He said we're going to learn from Pesach in Egypt. Pesach in Egypt was not bought with meiser money. So too, Pesach in the future generations is not bought for meiser money. Amalei Rabbi Akiva v'chidan and Efshem Mishiyefshem. Over there was no meiser. Meiser only comes from what you grow in the land. There was no meiser money. That's not a proof to later on. What does he hold? Amalei, Rabbi Eliezer responds to Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Eliezer was his teacher. Even though it's impossible, but the fact is, it still happened. I know that there was no Meiser Sheni there, but the fact is, there was no Meiser Sheni. That means that you could learn from something that was impossible over to something when it is possible. That means if Rabbi Eliezer holds that by the carbon pesach, that you're not allowed to use Meiser Sheni because in Egypt they didn't use Meiser Sheni, even though that was impossible. So too, he should learn that the mikveh, which is satisfactory for the women and as a conversion, and they don't need a bris, even though it's impossible. But so what? They don't need a bris. The fact is, they don't need a bris. Exactly the way he learns from Korban Pesach. That's what we should learn from the women. We're asking a question, Rabbi Lezer, why doesn't he say like Rabbi Yeshua? No, and then it was Meiser was only, they didn't have any Meiser. Right?
So why you can't pick
because Meiser Sheni is the Meiser that's brought to Yerushalayim to be spent there. That's the.
I mean, that sounds ridiculous. That's one. Yeah.
No, Meiser Rishon is not right. And nevertheless, Rabbi Lezer learns from that. So we see, it's what we're saying is, it sounds ridiculous to say, well, the women didn't have a circumcision. So we're saying, so what? That it's ridiculous. The fact is that that's what happened. And they didn't have a circumcision, and that should be satisfactory. Everyone holds that the mikveh works. Everyone over here is Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer agrees to Rabbi Yeshua that the mikveh works even without a circumcision. Ki pligi, where's the machlekes? The mal v'lei taval. If they had the circumcision, but they didn't have the mikveh. Rabbi Eliezer yalach miyavis. Rabbi Eliezer learns from the Yavis that he says that it's satisfactory. Rabbi Yeshua Babas Nami Tfilah Hava. Rabbi Yeshua argues, he says that there was a mikveh. The Yavis also went to the mikveh. It says, Minale, where does he know that from? Before the receiving of the Torah, it says, go to the people, sanctify them, and they should wash their clothing. We have a person that's tummy. Let's say he's about carry. It says he's supposed to go to the mikveh. He doesn't have to wash his clothes. Just has to go to the mikveh. So someone that has to use the mikveh doesn't have to wash his clothes. Someone that has to wash his clothes for sure has to use the mikveh. That's the extended part, the washing of the clothes. The more serious tum. So if you're telling me I have to wash his clothes, obviously they went to the mikveh. V'dilma nekiyas balma. Maybe they were just washing so that their clothing should be white, Yom Tov before Shavuos, before they receive the Torah. Should look nice. Elamei hacha. We have another source. It says, V'yikach Moshe Sadam v'Yizr kalam. Moshe took the blood and he sprinkled it on the people. V'gemiri, and it's been taught, Ein azah b'lei tefillah, that whenever the blood is sprinkled on the people, it always has, together with a mikveh. First there's a mikveh and then there's the blood that's sprinkled. We have that maybe by the Mitzvah. Okay, so what Rabbi Yeshua is saying is that our fathers in Egypt had the bris before they had the Korban Pesach, and then they went to the mikveh before they received the Torah. And Rabbi Lezer says no, there was no mikveh. Rabbi Yeshua, Tvila b'mayis minal, and how does Rabbi Yeshua know that they went to the mikveh? That the mothers went to the mikveh? says Svarahu. It's logical. What else would they have done to become Jewish? There's nothing else. Obviously, they went to the mikveh. That's an interesting halacha. Okay. Amar Rav Chia bar Abba Rav Yechanan Loila Mein Gerad Shimal V'Yikbal. Rav Chia bar Abba says the name of Rav Yechanan. He's not a convert until he has a circumcision and he goes to the mikveh. Pshita, the Gemara says, what's Rabbi Yechanan telling me? I have a machlekes, Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Shua, and the Chachamim. The Chachamim say you need Mila and Tefillah. Yachid v'Rabim, Malach Karabim. Rabbi Eliezer is a Yachid. Rabbi Shua is a Yachid. The Chachamim is the Rabbim, the majority. So, of course, we always follow the majority. I don't have statements from Rabbi Yechanan telling me what the halacha is when I have rules that tell me what the halacha is. So, Man Chachamim. The problem over here is that the sages is not really the majority. It's actually an individual opinion. So which opinion is that? It's Rabbi Yossi. The Tanya was taught in a brisa. Someone shows up, says, "I'm already circumcised, but I didn't go to the mikveh." It says, "Matpila naisayim abaka." We put him in the mikveh, and big deal. What does it mean, big deal? Well, we have a problem over here. If someone shows up and says that he's circumcised, maybe he's really an Arab. The Arabs are also circumcised. How do we know that the Mila was done l'shem mitzvah? It was circumcised in the hospital. How do we know that it was l'shem mitzvah? So, Rabbi Yossi, Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is it doesn't matter to us because the mikveh would be satisfactory. So even if the bris was no good, so what? We can do the tefillah. Now, if that's the case, okay, 1 second before we go further. Rabbi Yossi Aimer ein matpila. Rabbi Yossi says no. Rabbi Yossi says you can't put him in the mikveh because Rabbi Yossi says you need to have a circumcision before you put him in the mikveh. And we don't know if there was a circumcision. He says he's circumcised, but how do we know? There's no witnesses. We see that there's no foreskin, but we don't know if that was l'shem mitzvah. Maybe it was a hospital or an Arab. Lefika, therefore, what comes out from this is matbilin ger b'Shabbos divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Comes out is Rabbi Yehuda holds that you really only need one, and on Shabbos you're not allowed to make a conversion. So if a person was circumcised on Friday, so he's already Jewish. On Shabbos he can go to the mikveh. Why? He's not allowed to convert on Shabbos because he converted with the circumcision. And what does Rabbi Yossi say? Rabbi Yossi says, no, you need both. Ein matbilin. Rabbi Yossi says you can't put him in the mikvah on Shabbos because you need both. Amar Mar, we go back to discuss this brisa. Basically, what we got out of the brisa is that Rabbi Yossi is the view that you need both. And that's an individual opinion. So therefore, Rabbi Yechanan needs to tell us that the halacha is like Rabbi Yossi against Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua, which we don't have rules about. But they have rules, other rules, Rabbi Yossi versus other people. Okay. Therefore, you can put a ger in the mikvah on Shabbos. Pshita, given the Rabbi Yehuda, what are you telling me? We know already what Rabbi Yehuda's opinion was. He said that one thing is enough. He says, Rabbi Yehuda tvila ikar, tvila b'Shabbos loy, to come a second gavra. I could have thought that Rabbi Yehuda holds one is enough, but which one? I could have thought that he holds the mikvah is enough. And if the mikvah is enough, then that would mean that putting him in the mikvah on Shabbos would be, you need something? Putting in it would be the actual conversion, and he can't do a conversion on Shabbos. So, Kamash Malan, that's not Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Rabbi Yehuda's opinion was, Kamash Malan, Rabbi Yehuda, oyha boy. It's not that you need one, and that one is tvila, is the mikvah. No, I need one or the other one. And since the circumcision was done, so he's already Jewish, then the mikvah is just an additional. Rabbi Yossi Aimer ein matbilin. Rabbi Yossi says you don't put him in the mikvah. Pshita, that's obvious. We know what Rabbi Yossi holds, that you need both. Obviously, Rabbi Yossi holds that you need two things for the conversion. So you can't do the mikvah on Shabbos, So maybe really what Rabbi Yossi held was that the circumcision is the main thing. And if the circumcision wasn't in front of us, then we don't do the mikvah. But if he was circumcised yesterday on Friday, maybe we can put him in the mikvah on Shabbos because the main conversion was done already. Kamash Malan, the Rabbi Yossi Tartiboy comes to tell us, no, that's not Rabbi Yossi's view. Rabbi Yossi also said both the Mila and the Tefillah are both essential in the conversion. So you can't do either one.
Oh, because if he held the Mila was enough, then he would be allowed to go
Right.
on Shabbos.
Right. Amar Rabba. Rabba says, we have a case that happened by Reb Chia bar Rebbe. Probably Reb Chia bar Rebbe. Rav Yosef Masni, Rav Yosef bar Rebbe. Rav Yosef says that Rav Yosef bar Rebbe was also there. But Rav Safra Masni, Rav Yosef bar Reb Chia. Rav Safra says that Rav Yosef bar Reb Chia was also there. What happened? A convert that was circumcised, but did not go to the mikveh yet, came in front of them. And now this was at night. So Amalei Shei Kanad Lamachar Manatulina. Wait here till tomorrow and we'll put you in the mikveh. Shema Mina Tlas. We learned three things from this. Well, first of all, Shema Mina Ger Tzarech Shleishim. Why did Reb Safra add in who else was there? It's coming to tell me that you needed another person. So he gave us the other dayan. It was Rabbi Sheba B'chia. Shema Mina Ger Shimel V'yitval. We also learned that you need to be Yimal V'yitval. You need to have both circumcision and tefillah. Shema Mina in Matpil and Ger B'layla. We also learned that you can't put someone in the mikveh at night. You can't do conversions at night. B'nei Shema Mina Nami Binan Mumchin. Let us say a fourth Shema Mina. We learn a fourth thing. The fourth thing would be that you need big rabbis, experts. The Gemara says that we can't prove from that. Dilma de Klo. Maybe that just happened to be who was there. It's not a proof that that's what you need. Amar Reb Chia bar Abba, Amar Reb Yochanan. Reb Chia bar Abba says in the name of Reb Yochanan, Ger Tzarech Gimel. How do you know that a convert needs three people? Places asks, maybe this is also the Klo. Maybe this just happened to be that there were three people there. So he answers that Reb Safra wouldn't have had to mention who it was, all of that. The fact that he's mentioned, that he's adding this in, tells me that it's not just a chance. Okay. So Mishpat Ksivbe, because it says that it's a judgment. Tan Rabbanan, thought in the Bryce, Mishabav Amar Gerani. Someone shows up and says, I'm a convert. Yachal Nekablino. Maybe you automatically you say, okay, we believe you. Tamalaymer Itcha says with you, that means only b'muchsiklach, only if you can assume that that's true. Only something that's already been established that he's a convert. How do you know if he comes and he has witnesses? Moshe, what happened? He got off the plane.
You won't believe that they put too much gasoline on the plane. So now we have to deport. They put us in a new plane now.
Wow.
We'll be a little late. All good. All good.
Let's say he shows up with witnesses. Yeah. They're giving you more time, Moshe. They're giving you more time to finish the. I should finish quickly, so let you know. So, if a stranger will live with you in your land, so we're trusting the witnesses in Eretz Yisrael. How do we know in Chutz La'aretz also we're going to trust the witnesses? We'll trust them in Chutz La'aretz as well. The witnesses say that he is a convert. So why does it say in the land?
Nowadays, I mean, someone that you don't know comes to school and he says he's a convert. First of all, does he say he's a convert? Or he just comes down and he's
Yeah. Well, when it comes to shul and a minion, we don't really ask. It was an interesting thesis back on Hey, where Rabbi Yehuda says, "Why don't you go and hide yourself?" Rabbi Yehuda held that someone that the father wasn't Jewish. He says, "Go and conceal that fact that the father isn't Jewish and get a shidduch, get married." So place says, "Get married, you need to have some sort of proof. So they're going to ask questions. Marriage is not going to go so smoothly." And he says, "Well, that was if he was marrying a Kohen." The Chacham say that any family are considered chesed kashas. Mishpacha Yidu, any family that's known is considered kosher. So when the first time the guy comes, they're going to look into it. Usually, wants to be a member of the show, they can ask him some questions. But once someone's already in, it's good. So why does it say Baretz? Because in Eretz Yisrael you have to bring a proof. In Chutz La'aretz ain't tzarich lavi raya. You don't have to bring a proof. It says he's a convert, we're going to accept it. Rabbi Yehuda. Bein Baretz bein b'chutz la'aretz tzarich lavi raya. Some say no. You always need to bring a proof that he's a convert. I want to ask the question now on this brisa. Bahu ve'edav imai. If he comes with his witnesses, Kra lamali. He said we have a pasuk. The pasuk tells me that you trust the witnesses. Really? Why do you need a pasuk to say that you trust witnesses? You always trust them. Amrav Sheshes, it says, the witnesses aren't even saying that they know for sure. They say, we heard that he converted. And the pasuk tells me that I can trust witnesses that say that we've heard this. Yeah, this is like a big chiddush. They didn't even know, like, definitively. Baretz, when it says in Eretz Yisrael, "Lein lebaretz putz leitz minayin tam lamitcha b'chol makom shitcha." Pick say, we have a problem up here because the word itcha was used originally. If a non-Jew, if a convert comes and says that I'm a convert, maybe you should accept him. It says itcha, only one that's with you, only b'musikla. Now we come again and we say maybe it's only in Eretz Yisrael, not in Chutz La'aretz. We say no, in Chutz La'aretz also itcha, the same word. You used it already once, right? You can't use it twice. It says chadam yitcha, chadam ima. One is from yitcha, one is from ima. We have two words. Chacham ma'imrim bein baretz bein b'chutz la'aretz tzarich lavi raya. V'laksiv baretz. Chacham say that there's no difference in Eretz Yisrael and Chutz La'aretz. He always has to bring a proof. So what does he do? What do they do with the pasuk baretz? It says humi bailei dafil baretz mekablam geirim. It's a big chiddush that in Eretz Yisrael we also accept converts. Maybe they're not really converting because they want to accept the Torah. Maybe they're just converting because of the benefits of how nice Israel is. And even now, where it's not a land flowing with milk and honey, but nevertheless, you have all those other benefits. You have the meiser, you have the things that a poor person can get, the welfare benefits. So Kamash Malan comes to tell us that we nevertheless still accept converts. The rule is that whether in the land of Israel, whether outside the land of Israel, if a convert comes, he has to bring a proof. Obviously, it's a machlekes between Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim. Of course, we go like the Chachamim. I could have thought that we're going to follow Rabbi Yehuda because he has verses that seem to support him. Mashmalan, that we know, we follow the sages. Okay.
Rabbi, so many times we would have these discussions about the Kutim, and we wouldn't really be taking really want to rejuvenate the prophets. Here, some were saying, "Oh, if it says it's converted, it's okay." It seems like contradictory.
Right. Yeah. By the Kutim, we had reason to doubt.
Yeah, but they were taking it from initially first glance.
Well, actually, he needs some sort of proof. Not really accepting it. It's the Mutzak law. He has to be established that he's a ger, or he has to bring witnesses that there was a conversion.
We have to do this in a way that's not any else.
Right.
So it's not so easy.
Right. Okay. Right. Let's go further. Yeah, it's okay. Tanrabanan. Shvatim tzedek beinisha beinacha ben geri. You judge justly between a man and his brother and between a stranger. Mikanam Rabbi Yehuda Gershon Eskar bebezdin or is a ger. From this, Rabbi Yehuda says that a ger that converts in a bezdin, that's a ger. Beina lebein atzmai. If he says I converted on my own, ain't a ger. He's not considered a ger. Ma'aseh bechet shebal lefnei Rabbi Yehuda. The story song came in front of Rabbi Yehuda. Amar lo, he says niskayarti beini lebein atzmai. I converted on my own. Amalei Rabbi Yehuda, yesh chayim. You have witnesses to that? Amalei lav. No, I don't have witnesses. Yesh chabanim. Do you have any children? Amalei hein. He says yes. Amalei. He responds. Rabbi Yehuda tells him, nemanat lifsal asatzmucha. Basically, your conversion is no good because you converted on your own. But we don't trust you anyway because you're not Jewish, so we're not trusting you. But we can't trust you as a testimony about your children. So it's going to come out this like really strange concept that the children are Jewish, and he himself is not Jewish. How are the children Jewish if he's not? Well, he's not Jewish.
I mean, they might not permit now, but he has children. He has to be married.
Yeah. Yeah. We're leaving out the point of who is the mother. Yeah, I don't know who the mother is here. That's not part of the story. But the father is able to testify about his children, if they're kosher or not. The father has the rights to say that. We learn from Sukkim that the father is the one that's trusted. So if that's the case, then here he should be trusted to say what the status is. But the only thing is that we don't trust him because he's not Jewish. But who says he's not Jewish? He says he's not Jewish. So this is a concept called Shavia Nafshecha Ticha Deisura. If a person can make something prohibited on himself, even though we don't believe him. So it's sort of like a vow. We say that it's actually permissible. You want to say it's not permissible? Okay, so it's not permissible. But that's your own problem. So, okay. Does Rabbi Yehuda really say that he's not trusted about the children? Rabbi Yehuda says a person's trusted to say which child is the firstborn. A father is also trusted to say that my son was a child of a gerusha or a chalutza, or a daughter. Ben gerusha, ben chalutza. Which would affect him, which would affect her, which would affect him. No, which would affect her from marrying a Kohen, because the child, if he's a Kohen, he would be able to say that the daughter is halala. The sages say that he's not believed. How could you tell me that Rabbi Yehuda holds now that the father's not believed? To say about his children, Rabbi Yehuda holds the father is always believed. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Kachi Kamar. Rav Nachman explains it. This is what he means. According to you, you're not Jewish. And there's no testimony of a non-Jew. Ravina Amar Hachi Kamar. Ravina says this is what he's saying. Yesh l'chabanim. Hein. Do you have sons? He says yes. Yesh l'chabanei banim. Do you have grandsons? He says hein. He says yes. Amalei nemanat lifsal b'necha v'yata neman lifsal b'nei b'necha. But the sons he's believed, according to Ravina, but not for the grandchildren. He only has rights to testify about his sons. It's the same thing. It's just one generation removed. Tanya Nami Hachi was also taught in a brisa. Rabbi Yedaimer neman adam leimer al b'nai katan vein neman al b'nai gadol. He's trusted on his son, the minor, but he's not trusted on his son, the mature one. Rabbi Yechon explains this in the name of Rabbi Yechon. Like katan mamish, it doesn't mean minor. Like gadol mamish, and mature doesn't mean mature. Ala katan v'yesh leibanim zel gadol. Katan means someone that doesn't have children, because if he's a katan but he has children, that's what he meant by a gadol, by a mature one. Gadol vein leibanim, but a mature one that doesn't have children, zel katan, that's a child. Basically, coming out like Ravina is saying is that a father is only trusted to testify about his sons, but not about his grandsons. The Kavaseder of Nachman by Yitzchak, that he's not trusted to say anything about his sons. But Tanya Kavaseder Ravina, but we have a brisa that supports Ravina that he is trusted. That's only regarding other things, if he's able to say that he's a ben gerusha or other things, but when regarding the convert, that he won't be trusted. Itmar, we have a statement. Tana Rabbanan, Ahulaniaki Itmar, start. Itmar, Ahulaniaki Itmar, period. Tana Rabbanan, you have a brisa. Gershabaliskaya Bismanazeh, convert that comes to convert, we tell him, Mari Isa Shabasaliskaya. What did you see that you want to convert? Don't you see all the oppression and how degraded the Jewish people are, all the sufferings that we go through? If he says, yes, I know, the Amy Kedai, and I'm not even worthy of being connected to this, then Makabla Maisai, Miyad, immediately we accept him. What happens? We tell him just a few of the mitzvahs, a few of the light mitzvahs, a few of the serious mitzvahs. And we let him know that he has to be generous, he has to give tzedakah, right? The sin of not leaving those things, the fallen sheaves, the payah, the maiserani. And we also let him know the punishment of not fulfilling. I remember, like we say, we tell him until now you didn't come to conversion. If you eat forbidden fats, you're fine, no problem. If you violate Shabbos, there's no problem. There's a death penalty. You know what you're getting into here? Make sure that you read that the fine print before you sign. But nevertheless, we also tell them the reward. That the world to come is made for the tzaddikim. Yisrael b'zmanazen yechelim lekabel lo yirev tova v'lo yirev branis. The Jewish people nowadays are not able to receive not too much good, not too much punishment. Yeah. We don't overbear him with these words. What does that mean? We're not specific. Kibel, if he accepts this, then Molanaisai, we give him a bris right away. Let's say when we did the circumcision, there's some of the skin, how do they call it? Flesh that are still there. If that's the case, then you have to go back and cut off every piece of the foreskin. Nisrafa, once he was healed, they put him into the mikvah. There's two Torah sages that are there. And they let him know while he's there in the mikvah. They let him know a few of the small mitzvahs, a few of the major mitzvahs. Taval va'alaret Yisrael chol devarav. And he comes up. He's a Jew for all matters. Isha, what about a woman? Well, Nashim Meshivan I said b'mayim ad tzavara. the women put her into the water up to her neck. The two Torah sages stand outside. And they tell her, you know about Shabbos, you know about some minor mitzvahs, making brachas or something. Echad ger, vechad eved, meshucha. While she's in the water, yeah. She has to accept while she's in the mikvah. And whether it's a convert, whether it's a slave that's becoming free. You have to use a mikveh that would be kosher for a nida. Anything that would be an interposition by a nida, a chatzitza, it's a chaitzitz beger be'eved meshucher. Ubenida. Yeah, it's all the same halachas when it comes to chatzitza. Amar mar gershbal iskayim le maris shabbos iskayim medina mitzvahs kals mitzvahs kamers my time. Why do we tell them this? Why do we give them all of these details? The parish nifresh, because if he realizes that, so let him leave. Let him leave. We want to. He should make an informed decision. Rab Chelba says, "Kashan gerim liyisrael kesapachas." A convert could be as difficult to the Jewish people like leprosy. Yeah, if it's not sincere, and it could be a problem. Okay. This pasuk says it calls them that the stranger joins them, and it's like a sapachas, a nispachu. It's like added on to the house of Jacob, but that word is also sapachas. Medina sevain leket shekhu pei amaisrani my time. What's the reason why we inform them about these things, about the tzedakah? Because Amar Abchia Barabba Amar Abiyachim ben Nayach Nehareg al Pachs Mishaber Pruta Leinitin Li Shavin. Their halachas were totally different. And so we have to let them know that now he's not a Ben Nayach anymore. And when he sees someone that's taken from a field, he should know that he's doing it what's correct. So by a Ben Nayach, if he would be stealing, he would get a death penalty. We don't give him the option of paying back. So we have to let him know that that's not how it works. When he's Jewish, there's certain parts of the field that a poor person is allowed to take from. You don't overbear them with this speech. Where do you see this? The Ksiv, we see in Rus, it says, this is when Yomi was talking to Rus, and Rus kept saying, no, I'm going to go with you. And she saw that she was persistent, so she stopped speaking to her. Amrullah, she says, Asalatchum Shabbos. You know, you're going to have an issue of walking on Shabbos. It says, Basher Telchi Elech, I'll go wherever you go. Asalan Yichad, you won't be able to be secluded with the man. Basher Talini Yalin, I'll sleep wherever you sleep. Mefaktin and Sheish Meis Vidgimel Mitzvahs. You're going to be obligated to keep 613 mitzvahs. Amach, what is it? What's the Amech, Ami. Your nation is my nation. Asalan Avedis Kechavim, won't be able to worship idols. Elekecha, Elekayach, Elekai. Arba Mises Nimsur Lebezdin. There's 4 capital punishments. Basher Temusi Amos. Like you die, that's how I'll die. Beis Kvarim Nimsur Lebezdin. There's different places where the people are buried. We had that before. It says, well, B'Shameh Kaver, Miyad Vater Kimasametzisi. She saw that she was persistent. Kibel Mitzvahs. I'm sorry, Kibel Molanaisim Miyad. If he accepts the mitzvahs, then they circumcise him right away. My time is mitzvah machina. You're not allowed to delay a mitzvah. Okay, let's leave it over here.
Okay, thank you.
Good day. Thanks a lot.
Have a good day.